Hello, and welcome back to La Crime Noire. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you're drawn to dark, haunting stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now settle in, clear your mind, let the outside world slip away, and let's begin. Story 1. I'm a medical doctor, a forensic pathologist. A few months ago, I started my first official job at a large county morgue, the kind attached to a huge hospital system where nobody upstairs thinks too hard about what happens below them. After years of school, residency, and the kind of hours that ruin your sleep and your personality, I thought I'd finally reached a stable point. I wanted routine. I wanted work that was clear and methodical. In my line of medicine, there's no pretending, no salesmanship, no bedside performance. A body doesn't argue with you. It doesn't lie. You examine, you measure, you cut, you document. You determine cause and manner of death, write the report, move on to the next case. It isn't glamorous. It isn't meant to be. It's necessary. The morgue is in the basement level of the hospital complex, down a set of elevators most people never take. The air changes when the doors open. It's colder, drier, and it carries a constant chemical smell that gets into your hair and your clothes no matter how careful you are. Stainless steel tables line the autopsy suite. Fluorescent lights buzz overhead with a harsh white glare that makes everything look slightly unreal. The drains in the floor are perfectly clean, which somehow makes them worse. Everything is designed to be washable, to be wiped down and reset. Like death is a mess you can disinfect away if you scrub hard enough. During the day, there are only 3 of us down there. The senior medical examiner, me, and the janitor. The senior examiner is a quiet woman with a steady, practiced calm. She spends most of her time in her office behind a closed door, reviewing files, signing forms, making calls. She speaks to me when she needs something specific, a measurement, a confirmation, an update on a case. Otherwise, she keeps to herself. She's not unfriendly exactly. Just distant, like she's learned that the best way to survive this work is to stay contained. Which left the janitor. He was old, older than he should have been to still be working a job like that. His skin was deeply wrinkled, thick like weathered leather. His posture was severely hunched, as if his spine had slowly folded in on itself over the years. He wore the standard gray maintenance uniform, but it always hung too loose on him, as if he'd shrunk inside it. He dragged a mop bucket down the long tiled hallways with slow, careful steps, never rushing, never stopping to talk. He never spoke to me. He never spoke to the senior examiner. He just cleaned. Floors, tables, trash bins, biohazard containers. When we finished an exam, he would appear eventually, silently, and wipe down the steel surfaces as if he was erasing the entire idea of what had happened there. I assumed he was one of those people who'd learned to survive by becoming invisible. At first, that was all he seemed like. A quiet, isolated man doing a miserable job. Then, within my first 3 weeks, I started noticing a pattern. The morgue has a small viewing room set off from the main hallway. It's not big, just a clean space with a door, a couch, a few chairs, and the ability to present the deceased in a way that allows families to identify them or spend a last moment before the funeral home takes over. That room carries a different kind of weight than the rest of the building. In the autopsy suite, you can detach. You can put distance between yourself and the fact that this was a person. You focus on anatomy, injury patterns, pathology. You do your job. In the viewing room, you're forced to remember what death does to the living. Nothing in medical training prepares you for raw grief at close range. The kind that comes out of a person like a scream torn from their ribs. The kind that makes people collapse or shake or beg you to say there's been a mistake. I've seen parents fall to their knees like their legs simply stopped working. I've seen spouses clutch a body bag as if they could physically keep the person from being taken away. I've heard a sound a mother made once that didn't even feel human. Just a continuous wail of pure pain that echoed down the corridor and made the hair rise on my arms. It never gets easier. You can't get used to it without becoming something you don't want to be. The first time I noticed the pattern with the janitor, we had a young man brought in after a motorcycle accident. The injuries were catastrophic. There was nothing to fix. His parents came down to identify him. I was at the reception area, filling out paperwork and trying not to listen too closely. But I could hear the mother through the heavy wooden door. She was sobbing so hard it sounded like she was choking. Her grief carried down the tiled hallway and bounced off the walls. It wasn't just sadness. It was the sound of someone being shattered. I remember standing there with my pen hovering over the form, feeling that familiar knot of pity and helplessness in my stomach. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say. They came here hoping for closure and have found the worst kind of confirmation instead. Then I saw the janitor. He came down the hall, dragging his mop bucket. Slow shuffle. Head slightly lowered, same as always. He stopped outside the viewing room. He leaned his mop against the wall with careful precision and opened the door. He went inside. At first, I assumed he was being inconsiderate. I thought maybe he needed to empty the trash or wipe something down, and he was so detached he didn't even register the family's presence. I started to move toward the room to stop him, already forming the words in my head. Please give them privacy. But before I reached the door, the screaming stopped. Not gradually, not fading into quiet or sobbing. It stopped completely, as if someone had cut the sound from the world. I slowed, confused, and stood there listening. Silence. Less than a minute later, the janitor stepped back out. He picked up his mop. He took his bucket and continued down the hallway as if nothing had happened. A short time after that, the parents left the viewing room. I braced myself for the sight of ruined faces, prepared to offer water, a chair, anything. I expected them to look destroyed because that's what people look like after confirming their child is dead. They didn't. The mother's face was dry. The father held her hand with steady calm. They looked peaceful, not numb, not in shock. Peaceful in a way that didn't belong in that hallway. They thanked the receptionist politely and walked toward the elevator like they were leaving a normal appointment. I stood there staring, unable to move for a moment because my brain refused to accept what I'd just witnessed. You do not recover from the sudden death of your child in 2 minutes. That kind of grief rearranges your entire life. It doesn't evaporate. Over the next month, I watched the same thing happen again and again. A grieving family would arrive, already broken. The viewing room door would close, screaming, sobbing, chaos. Then the janitor would drift into place nearby. his bucket rolling softly over the tile. He would slip into the room, and within moments, silence would fall. Then he would leave, and the family would emerge, calm, holding each other, wiping a few tears maybe, but the crushing despair was gone. Their faces looked lighter, as if someone had removed a heavy weight from their chests. It wasn't normal composure. It was relief, not acceptance. Relief. I never heard what he said to them. Once I tried to stand near the door, pretending to check something on a clipboard, straining to listen. I couldn't make out words. All I heard was a low, rhythmic whispering from inside, like a chant. The syllables were thick and harsh, not any language I recognized. It didn't sound like comfort. It sounded like procedure. Whatever he was doing in there, it wasn't therapy. It wasn't kindness. It was removal. One afternoon, I finally asked the senior examiner about it. I chose my words carefully, because in places like this, you learn quickly that people don't like questions that hint at discomfort. Have you ever noticed how the janitor interacts with the families? I asked. She didn't look up from her paperwork. Her pen continued moving like I hadn't spoken. The old man has worked here longer than I have, she said. That wasn't an answer. I waited. She paused, then added, he has a gift for comforting the bereaved. Leave him to his business. Her tone was sharp and final. Conversation closed. That alone should have made me stop digging. A smart person would have heard that tone and backed away. But my training is built around questions, around patterns, around refusing to accept impossible outcomes without an explanation. If you ignore something that doesn't make sense, you eventually pay for it. And the pattern with the families wasn't the only strange thing. There was also the rule about the night shift. There's a strict, unwritten rule in our facility. Nobody stays past 6 in the evening. Officially, it's framed as a practical issue. They claim the hospital reduces ventilation and power in non-essential basement sectors at night to save money. That explanation is convenient, but it's a lie. The power stays on. The lights still work. The freezers still hum. The ventilation still runs. The real rule is simpler. Medical staff must be out before nightfall. Only the janitor stays. He is the only person allowed to be in the morgue overnight. At first, I thought it was just policy, union rules, whatever. Then I learned how aggressively it was enforced. During my second month, we had a backlog of reports after a pileup on the highway. Multiple fatalities, multiple autopsies and paperwork that had to be finished before the next day because law enforcement and families were waiting. I decided to stay at my desk after hours and type up autopsy notes. Nothing dramatic. I'd done it 100 times in residency. At around 5:30, I watched the senior examiner pack her bag. She stepped into my doorway and looked at me. "Make sure you leave before 6, she said. I nodded, not really looking up. I kept typing. At exactly 6 o'clock, my office door swung open. The janitor stood in the doorway holding his mop. He wasn't hunched the way he usually was. Or maybe he was, but the angle of the light made him look different, bigger. His deep, dark eyes fixed on mine with a focus that made my stomach tighten. "It is time for you to go," he said. It was the first time I'd heard his voice. It was so deep it didn't fit his body. I forced a polite smile, the one doctors use when they're irritated but trying to be professional. "I just need another hour," I said. "I'll lock up when I'm done." He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He stepped fully into my office, walked to my desk, and reached down to the wall outlet. He pulled the power cord from the socket. The computer screen went black. An hour of work, unsaved, gone instantly. I stood up so fast my chair rolled backward. "Are you serious?" I snapped. I was angry, ready to yell at him, ready to demand to see a supervisor. But when I looked at his face, the anger drained out of me like someone had opened a valve. His expression was blank. Not hostile, not annoyed, blank in a way that felt dangerous, like the absence of emotion was the point. His posture held a tension I recognized from animals, not people, the kind of controlled stillness that comes right before a strike. "The work is done," he said slowly. "You leave now." Something in me understood that arguing would be a mistake. I packed my bag without another word and walked to the elevator. In the hallway, he watched me the entire time. He didn't move until the elevator doors closed between us. That incident planted a deep seed of suspicion. The unnatural peace he produced in grieving families, the strict night rule, the senior examiner's refusal to discuss him. Everything pointed to something wrong happening in the basement of this hospital. I couldn't let it go. I tried to tell myself to stay professional, to stop acting like a scared intern in a ghost story. But I'm a scientist by nature. My job is literally to open bodies and find the truth inside them. Curiosity is not a hobby for me, it's a reflex. I needed to know what he was doing at night. The opportunity came 3 days ago. We received the body of a young woman in the early afternoon. Sudden medical failure. No warning. One of those deaths that makes everyone in the room quiet because it feels unfair, even to professionals. Her family arrived shortly after. Parents, siblings, a fiancé, a cluster of people who looked like they'd been ripped out of ordinary life and thrown into a nightmare. The viewing room filled with sound immediately. Wailing so loud it seemed to push through the thick walls. People begging, screaming her name, voices breaking. I stood at the end of the hallway, watching. I told myself I was only observing, only being available if needed, but really I was waiting for the pattern. The janitor arrived, slow shuffle, bucket rolling. He pushed open the viewing room door and slipped inside. Less than a minute later, silence fell. Not a gentle quiet. An absolute silence, as if the air had been drained of noise. He walked out, picked up his mop, and moved on. 5 minutes later, the family emerged. They were holding each other. They spoke softly. Some had tears on their faces, but the overwhelming despair was gone. They looked relieved, as if something heavy had been taken from them. I made my decision right there. That night, I would stay. At 5:30, I packed my bag like I always did. I said goodnight to the senior examiner with a calm tone I didn't feel. I walked down the main hallway toward the elevators as if I was leaving. But instead of pressing the button to go up, I slipped through a heavy fire door that led into an old supply storage room. The storage room was the kind of place hospitals forget about. Dusty boxes of outdated medical supplies, broken rolling chairs, old filing cabinets with no labels. It smelled like cardboard and neglect. I squeezed behind a tall metal shelving unit, sat on the cold floor, and waited. It felt ridiculous. A grown adult hiding in a supply room like a teenager trying to spy on their parents. But my pulse didn't care about dignity. 6 o'clock passed. I heard distant sounds of heavy doors locking for the night. The usual background hum of daytime activity upstairs faded until the basement felt cut off from the world. The silence down there wasn't peaceful. It was thick. It pressed against my ears. The cold seeped through my scrubs, making my joints ache. Minutes dragged. I listened for the familiar sound of the mop bucket, the slow footsteps. Nothing. Then a new sound broke the quiet. Heavy mechanical clanking, followed by the squeal of metal hinges. It came from the cold storage room, the area with the large stainless steel refrigeration units where bodies are kept before and after examination. I rose slowly, legs stiff, and pushed the fire door open a crack. The main overhead fluorescents were off now. The only light came from green emergency exit signs and faint spill from distant hallways. The morgue looked different in that dim, sickly glow, less like a workplace, more like a place that had always belonged to the dead. I slipped out and walked down the corridor as quietly as I could. My heart hammered. Every instinct told me to turn back and get out, to go upstairs and pretend I'd never been curious. But I kept walking. The cold storage door was slightly ajar. I pressed my back to the wall beside the frame and listened. At first I heard something wet and heavy, a tearing sound like thick fabric being ripped apart by bare hands, then a sickening squelch, followed by a rhythmic smacking. Someone was eating. My mouth went dry so fast it felt painful. I leaned forward and looked through the gap. Inside, the cold storage room was lit by the small internal light from an open refrigeration drawer. The drawer was pulled all the way out. On the metal tray lay the body of the young woman from that afternoon. Standing over her was the janitor. His back was toward me, pale, wrinkled, exposed. He leaned over the corpse, and both of his arms were buried deep inside her abdominal cavity. My medical brain tried to take over, tried to categorize. There was no standard incision, no Y-cut, no scalpel work, no controlled dissection, no tools. He had forced his hands through skin and muscle like they were paper. His shoulders heaved, and he pulled his arms back with a wet, sucking pop. In his long, blood-soaked fingers, he held a dark mass of tissue, a liver. He raised it to his face. Then he opened his mouth, and my body went cold with a kind of horror I can't properly describe. His jaw unhinged, dropping lower than a human jaw should. His teeth were sharp and jagged and completely black, like burned glass. He bit into the raw organ. The chewing was loud in the quiet room, wet and steady. He swallowed a chunk whole, his throat bulging in a way that made my stomach turn. Then he took another bite, casual, practiced. Nausea hit me in a violent wave. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from gagging, eyes watering, skin crawling. I pulled back from the doorway, desperate to run. The only thought in my mind was escape. Get out. Get up the stairs. Get into light and people and noise. My heel caught the edge of a plastic biohazard bin sitting against the wall. It tipped. Hit the tile. A loud hollow crash that spilled plastic gloves and empty syringes across the corridor. The sound was enormous in the silence. The chewing stopped instantly. I froze so completely I forgot to breathe. I stared at the open gap in the door. A low growl rolled out from the cold room. It vibrated in the air, not quite a sound and not quite a feeling. It was the noise a large predator makes over food when something approaches. "Who is there?" a deep scraping voice asked. I didn't answer. I turned and ran. I sprinted down the dark hallway, shoes slipping on polished tile. I ran past reception, past the viewing room, toward the back stairwell that led to an emergency exit. Behind me, the cold storage door slammed open with a violent crash that echoed down the corridor. Then came footsteps, heavy, fast, impossible. And mixed into them was the rapid clicking of long fingernails striking tile. He was moving with terrifying speed. I reached the end of the corridor and cut sharply into the autopsy suite, thinking I could loop through the exam rooms to the service elevator in back. I pushed through the swinging double doors and plunged into darkness and stainless steel. I ducked behind a large examination table, crouched low, and pressed my back against a cold metal cabinet. I held my breath until my chest hurt. The swinging doors burst open. The janitor stepped into the suite. In the dim light from the hallway, he was smeared with blood from chest to chin. His breathing came in harsh pulls, air whistling through those jagged teeth. His posture had changed. He stood taller and his limbs looked wrong, too long, too loose, like they didn't match human proportions. He walked slowly down the aisle between tables, fingers dragging against the steel edges as if he was feeling for vibrations. "You did not leave," he whispered. The words echoed off tile walls. "You broke the rule. I told you the work was done." I pressed my hands harder against my mouth. Tears stung my eyes. The only exit was behind him. There was nowhere to go. He passed the table I was hiding behind. He didn't look down. He kept walking toward the back of the room. For a second, I thought I had a chance. If he went far enough away, I could crawl out and sprint for the doors. I shifted my weight, and a massive hand dropped down from above the table and clamped onto my shoulder with crushing strength. I screamed. He ripped me upward like I weighed nothing. My feet left the floor. In one violent motion, he threw me across the room. I hit a metal rolling cart. Stainless steel tools crashed to the floor in a loud, chaotic clatter. I landed on my back, pain exploding through my ribs, breath knocked out of me completely. I lay there gasping, trying to pull air into lungs that wouldn't cooperate. He stood over me. His face was blank again, but now the blankness was fury. His eyes were solid black, no whites, no reflection. Blood dripped from his chin onto my scrubs in slow, steady drops. I scrambled backward, pushing with my heels until my back hit the concrete wall. Nowhere left. "Please," I choked out, hands raised like that would matter. "Please don't kill me. I won't say anything, I swear." He crouched down until his face was inches from mine. The smell coming off him was overwhelming. Raw meat, old blood, rot. It made my stomach heave. Then, in a calm, raspy whisper, he spoke. "Do you know what I am, doctor?" I shook my head frantically. "I am a ghoul," he said, like he was introducing himself. "I consume the flesh of the dead. It is my nature. It is how I sustain myself." My mind tried to reject it. Folklore isn't supposed to kneel in front of you and breathe on your face. But his grip on reality was stronger than mine. I could feel it. "I have lived in the dark spaces of humanity for a very long time," he continued. "For centuries, my kind dug in the dirt and broke open wooden boxes. We hunted in mud and rot. It was difficult, dangerous, and humans have always hunted us when they catch us." He grabbed the collar of my shirt and pulled me closer, as if he wanted to make sure every word sank into me. "But the world changed," he said. "Humans became organized. You built places like this. Cold rooms, metal drawers. You gather your dead and lay them out for me. You made it easy. My throat worked around a swallow. Why don't you just kill me, I imagined. He showed those jagged teeth in something that wasn't quite a smile. Because of the arrangement. Arrangement? I do not kill the living, he said. Killing brings attention. Police, lights, questions, and finally hunters. I only take from the dead, specifically the liver. It is the richest. It holds the deepest essence. I take it, and no one notices. My mind snapped to the paperwork, the missing tissue, the way certain reports can be explained away as trauma or decay. Your senior examiner signs, he went on, and attributes what is missing to damage or decomposition. The bodies go to fire or earth, and I eat. The senior examiner knew. Of course she knew. That was why her voice had gone sharp when I asked. That was why the 6 o'clock rule wasn't a suggestion. She wasn't protecting staff from a budget decision. She was protecting a secret, or protecting herself. But the families, I said, the words spilling out, because I needed something to make sense. What do you do to them? What do you say in the viewing room? The ghoul's smile widened into something that stretched the skin of his face in a way that made my stomach twist. That is the price, he whispered. The payment. He leaned in closer, and his voice lowered until it felt like it was crawling into my ear. Grief is heavy, he said. Toxic. It poisons the living and stains places. When I consume the essence of their dead, I create a void. I speak the words of transaction, and I pull their grief into that void. I stared at him, shaking. I take their pain, he murmured almost tenderly. I swallow their agony. I leave them peace. He leaned back slightly, studying my face like he was curious how much I could hold before I broke. I eat their dead, he said softly, and in exchange they do not suffer the full weight of loss. A fair trade. I get my meal. Your hospital gets a reputation for strangely peaceful goodbyes. Administration ignores what it doesn't want to understand. And I eat in peace. His fingers tightened on my collar. And now you broke the rule, he said, voice hardening. You are a loose thread. No, I pleaded. My voice cracked. Tears ran hot down my face. I'm not. I understand now. I understand the transaction. You need me to process the bodies. You need me to sign in the daytime so you can do this at night. I'll help, like the senior examiner. I won't tell anyone. He stared for a long time. It felt endless. Those black eyes didn't blink. He searched my face with the calm patience of something that had waited out centuries. Finally, he muttered, as if speaking to himself, a new arrangement. He leaned in, and his lips, cold and wet, pressed against my ear. If you ever speak of this to the living world, he whispered, and the words seemed to vibrate inside my skull, I will not wait for you to end up on a metal tray. I will come to your home. I will tear you open while your heart is still beating, and I will eat you whole. Do you understand? Yes, I gasped, nodding hard. Yes, I understand. I promise. He released my shirt and stood, unfolding into that impossible height again. He looked down at me with complete dominance, like a predator satisfied that the prey had learned its place. Go home, doctor, he said. The work is done? He walked out through the swinging doors, footsteps heavy as they faded down the hallway toward the cold room. I stayed on the floor of the autopsy suite for a long time, shaking so hard my teeth click. When I finally managed to stand, my legs felt disconnected from my body. I stumbled out, ran up the back stairwell, and burst into the cold night air in the parking lot like I was breaking the surface of water. I haven't been back since. I called in sick for 3 days, voice careful, excuses simple. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the open drawer and the internal light and that black mouth opening too wide. But I know I have to go back tomorrow. 'Cause if I quit, if I disappear, he'll assume I'm going to talk. He'll assume I'm a loose thread. I'm writing this because I need someone, somewhere, to know it's real. I need the secret to exist outside my head for even a moment, because carrying it alone feels like being buried alive. I took an oath to protect the living, and to do that, to survive, I have to feed the dead to a monster. Tomorrow morning I'll put on my scrubs, ride the elevator down to that cold fluorescent basement, and nod at the old janitor with the mop like he's just another employee. And I will never, ever stay past 6 o'clock again. Story 2. My head slips out of my hand and smacks the desk. "Fuck!" I yell, jerking awake as pain shoots through my nose and forehead. For a second, I'm in that hazy place we all know, the confused moment after a random nap at work where you can't tell if you've been asleep for 2 minutes or 2 hours. My eyes struggle to focus. My mouth tastes stale. My neck aches from being bent at a bad angle. Then the bright glow of my computer monitor hits me, and I remember where I am. I'm at work. I'm pushing 40, and I work overnight as a hospital phone operator, which sounds important until you realize what it really is. I sit in a tiny office and route calls. I make announcements overhead when needed. I answer the same questions 100 times, and I'm not allowed to leave my post unless someone relieves me. That last part is technically a hard rule. In reality, I sneak out to the bathroom when I have to, because it's right around the corner, and I'm not going to pee my pants for policy. Still, the expectation is clear. I stay in the chair, I stay in the room, I stay available. Most nights, my biggest job is staying awake. I bring snacks. I watch YouTube. I play on my Switch. Anything to make a 12-hour shift feel less like I'm trapped in a box. Some nights I go 3 or 4 hours without a single call. Sometimes I go the whole shift without seeing another person face to face. I can usually hear security in their office down the hall, the TV murmuring, a cough now and then. From farther away, there's always some noise from the ER, crying, yelling, the occasional shout that carries. But honestly, to say I'm isolated is an understatement. My office used to be a janitor closet. Somebody stuck a desk in here and called it a workspace. It's packed with alarms, too many phones, multiple monitors, a CB radio, the hospital intercom mic, and a faded sign made in Microsoft Paint that says, "You rock," taped crookedly beneath a thermostat that hasn't worked in years. I check my phone. 3 a.m. I don't know when I fell asleep, but it can't have been long because my work screen is still on. The system signs me out if I don't move the mouse for more than 3 minutes. The monitor never lies about that. I rub my face, trying to shake off the fog. The spot on my nose throbs where it hit the desk. I stand up, stretch until my back pops, start a cup of coffee in the little machine on the counter, then hurry to the restroom while it pours. On the way, I do what I always do. I stop at the small window in the door that looks out toward the ER waiting area. A lot of nights, that window is the only proof I have that the rest of the world is still functioning. I don't see anyone, no patients, no staff, no movement. I keep going to the restroom. When I'm walking back, coffee smell in the air, I glance left toward the registrar cubicles. That's where staff usually sit with patients, talking about insurance and paperwork. I always thought it was one of the crueler parts of the job, putting a dollar amount on survival while someone is already scared. Past that area, you can see into the main waiting room where the gift shop and volunteer desks sit. The lights over there automatically dim after 10 p.m., which leaves the whole place hollow and half dead looking. And in that dim glass and plastic and shadow, I see a man staring back at me. I almost lose it. I make a sound that comes out as a yelp, high and stupid like a little kid. My body locks up. My brain goes blank. For a few seconds, I'm convinced there's someone right there in the dark, watching me. Then reality catches up. That's my own reflection. The plastic partition some of the registrars still kept after the pandemic is catching me at the wrong angle. That's all. Just me. My own face and shoulders thrown back at me in a way that makes it look like someone else. I let out a shaky breath and laugh quietly. Embarrassed, even though nobody's there to hear me. Still, I glance back one more time before I move on. Something about it bothers me. It feels like the reflection was already standing there before I turned my head. Like it had been waiting for me to notice. Hospitals are creepy at night. I don't care who you are. They're worse when you're alone and the lights are dim and the building keeps making quiet sounds that have no obvious source. I hate walking through that area when I go out on smoke breaks because everything about it feels like the setting for a bad story. I go back to my office and sip my coffee, grateful for something warm in my hands. I pull up Instagram on my phone, trying to kill a few minutes before my brain starts thinking too hard. No connection. The hospital internet is down again. It happens constantly at this top-of-the-line place that somehow has money for executive bonuses, but can't keep the Wi-Fi stable overnight. I've been here 11 years, and what I got for that was a certificate with a torn corner and a pen that says, "Thanks for being amazing, but the bills don't care about respect." So here I am. 4 hours left in the shift. No internet. I left my switch at home. I haven't had a call in almost 2 hours. Then I hear a knock. It comes from somewhere out in the hallway. My first thought is relief. Oh, thank God. Maybe my relief is here early. Maybe I can get outside for a cigarette and remind myself the world still exists beyond beige walls. Like I said, I'm not supposed to leave the office unattended. If a call comes in that requires an emergency announcement and I'm not here, people can die. That's not dramatic. It's just true. I took care of my grandparents for years, all 4 of them, and I got used to living with the idea that an emergency could happen any moment. I had to be reachable. I had to be ready. This job taps into that same nerve in me, so I do take it seriously, even when it feels like a joke most nights. I go to the door thinking my relief forgot her badge and couldn't buzz herself in. But when I get there, there's nobody. Just an empty hallway, beige walls, the hum of lights, the air conditioner breathing. Well, damn, I mutter. Maybe I imagined it. I turn back toward my desk, passing the door that leads to the registrar area, and I glance through the little window out of habit. That's when I see it again. The reflection. Not the small, distorted version of me leaning into glass. The full-body reflection I saw earlier, standing in the same spot as before, still facing me. For a second, the hallway seems to go cold. Every hair on my arms rises. My stomach tightens hard enough to make me feel nauseous. I rub my eyes fast and look again. It's gone. Now I can only barely make out my own reflection, peering through the window, too faint and far to see any details. I tell myself it was fatigue. It was my brain trying to build a person out of shadows and stress. I let out a nervous laugh because laughing is easier than admitting I'm scared in an empty hallway at 3 a.m. But I don't want to turn my back to that door. The building suddenly feels too quiet, like it's holding its breath with me. I force myself into my office, sit down, and take another sip of coffee. Then the phone rings. I jump so hard I nearly spill it. My hand shakes as I grab the receiver. Operator, how may I direct your call? Silence. The line is still open. They didn't hang up. They're just there. I repeat my greeting, the way I always do in case the caller didn't hear me. Hello? This is the operator. How may I direct your call? The call disconnects. I glance at the switchboard software, expecting to see the number or at least a timestamp. The line is blank. No number. No time. Nothing. Just my name under operator. The phone rings again. I answer, and before I can even get through the greeting, I hear heavy breathing. Slow. Deep. Deliberate. Like someone holding the phone close to their mouth to make sure I hear it. I start my greeting anyway because my brain clings to routine when it doesn't know what else to do. The call ends. I look at the switchboard log. Again. No number. Just my name. Then a phone rings again, but not the switchboard phone. The code phone. The bright red one reserved for internal emergencies. The one that means cardiac arrest, fire, a patient crashing, something serious. That phone does not ring often, and when it does, you move fast. My body reacts before my mind does. I grab the pen and notepad that stay beside it and snatch up the receiver. Operator. No words, just breathing. Hello? Operator, I say louder. The breathing gets louder too, like whoever it is leaning in closer. It makes no sense because the phone is already against my ear, but it feels closer anyway. Then the line goes dead. That red phone isn't connected to the computer. No caller ID, no log, no way to trace where it came from. What the fuck is happening? I say out loud, and hearing my own voice in the small room makes it sound thinner than I want. Is someone messing with me? I don't have friends here. Not really. Not the kind who would prank call me. And even if someone hated me enough to try, this isn't a normal prank. Nobody plays with the code line. That's how you get fired fast. I pick up the landline and dial the ER registration extension. That's where my relief should be. The line is busy. I try a second extension. Busy. I grab my cell phone and call the hospital's main number, thinking maybe the system is glitching and looping somewhere. Busy signal. What the hell? I try calling my husband. The call drops instantly. No service. That doesn't happen in this building. It's a hospital. The service is usually solid. I try again. Same thing. I grab the landline and dial his number by memory. Nothing. No ring. No voice. Just dead air that makes my ear feel stuffed. Then I hear another knock. It echoes down the hallway and into my office like the sound is traveling through a pipe. I turn toward the doorway. My office doesn't even have a real door. Just an empty metal frame painted beige to match everything else. From where I sit, all I can see is a blank wall across the hallway. The ER door is to the right. The door to the bathroom and registrar area is to the left. I can't tell which one the knock came from. It should be the ER door. Nobody's supposed to be in the other area at this hour. That part of the building's basically dead overnight. Another knock. I honestly would rather run straight through the wall like a cartoon and sprint until my lungs burn than walk out of this office through either door. But I can't just sit here and pretend. If it is a real code call, if someone needs help, my job is to respond. That's the whole point of me being stuck in this closet all night. So I stand up, move to the edge of the doorway, and crouch slightly so I can peek out without fully stepping into the hall. First, I look toward the bathroom and registrar door. No one. Then I turn my head toward the ER door. I see a shadow on the wall, a silhouette. Relief hits me so fast it almost feels like anger. Finally, a person. Someone real. Someone I can talk to. Someone I can tell about the calls and the breathing and how my brain is starting to slip. I stand up and rush to the ER door. I hit the release button and yank it open. Empty waiting room. No patients. No staff. No movement. Just chairs. A vending machine glowing in the corner, and the constant hum of overhead fluorescence. My stomach drops. On the far side of the waiting room is another door with a small window. Through that window, I see it again. My reflection, standing there, staring. It's partly swallowed by shadow, so I can't make out the face clearly, but I know it's looking right at me. The fluorescent lights start to flicker violently. The bright white waiting room stutters between light and black, like the building can't decide whether to show me what's there. Then the breathing comes back. Not through a phone this time. In the air. Loud enough that it feels like it's coming from every direction. And it can't be coming from the intercom because the only mic is in my office behind me. The breathing starts slow, almost calm, then grows louder with every flicker. My heart pounds. My mouth goes dry. My skin breaks into sweat. I want to close the door, but I can't move. I'm frozen, staring into the strobing light and darkness, knowing something is staring back. The breaths get louder, closer. And with the breathing, I hear footsteps. Slow at first, like someone pacing, then quicker, closer. Each flicker of light reveals the shape nearer than it was the last time. I finally snap out of it and slam the door shut. The moment it closes, something hits it from the other side, hard enough to rattle the handle in my hand and shove me backward. I run. Back into my office, heart trying to climb out of my throat, and I drop to the floor and crawl under the desk like a kid hiding from a monster. Wake up, I whisper. Wake up. This has to be a dream. It has to be. It feels like the kind of nightmare where you can't run properly, where your legs don't work, where the world keeps looping the same moment. Wake up, I whisper again, louder. Wake up. I squeeze my eyes shut and slap my own forehead with both hands like pain can restart reality. Zzz. Zzz. Static bursts from the CB radio, then a voice pushes through it, low and warped like it's fighting to be heard. Wake up. My blood turns cold. I reach up and rip cables out of the little black radio box until the static dies. My hands are shaking so badly I can hardly open the desk drawer, but I manage it. I grab a pair of scissors. It's ridiculous. Scissors aren't a weapon. But holding something sharp makes me feel like I'm not completely helpless. If anything comes around that corner, it's getting stabbed. That's the only thought I can hold on to. I crouch under the desk and grip the scissors so tightly, my palm starts to sting. When I shift my hand, I feel warmth. I've squeezed hard enough that the metal edge has nicked me. Blood slicks my skin. Then I hear a faint beep, a sound I've heard a million times, the ER door unlocking from the outside. The sound the badge reader makes when someone swipes in. The metal handle creaks as it's turned slowly. The latch releases. Whatever ran toward me is inside now. The heavy breathing drifts closer, filling the doorway like fog. I can't tell if scissors would hurt it. I can't tell if it's even something you can hurt. My brain tries to imagine what I'm supposed to do and keeps returning the same answer. There's nothing you can do. I grab my phone and open the Notes app. My fingers fumble, but I type anyway, fast and messy. I love you. I'm sorry. I tuck the phone under the desk in the corner like someone will find it later and give it to my husband. Like I'm already gone. The breathing stops just outside the doorway. Not fading. Not moving away. Stopping. Like whatever it is has found me and no longer needs to search. I hold my breath without meaning to. My chest burns. Then a pale hand curls slowly around the metal doorframe. It knocks. Knock. Pause. Knock. Pause. Knock. The sound is gentle, almost polite, and somehow that makes it worse. I don't move. I don't blink. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears. Then the breathing returns, but not outside. Inside. In my office. In the room with me. A voice speaks softly, close enough that it feels like it touches the back of my neck. Operator. My stomach drops as if the floor is open. I raise my head slowly, painfully slowly, and look toward the desk above me. A face leans into view as if it has crawled up onto the desk surface. My face, but wrong. The eyes are too wide. The skin looks dull, stretched tight over sharp cheekbones. The lips hang slightly open like it's learning how to breathe. It smiles. Not wide, just enough to show it recognizes me. Operator, it says again. Its voice sounds like mine after screaming too long, hoarse and strained, like the sound has been scraped raw. It tilts its head, studying me the same way I studied it through the glass. Code. Blue. My throat tightens. For a second, I can't swallow. The overhead lights flicker harder, throwing shadow across its features so fast that it looks almost normal in one flash, then twisted in the next. You didn't answer, it says. Every phone in my office rings at once. The switchboard line. The code phone. A spare handset I didn't even remember was connected. The CB radio erupts again in static even though I yanked the cables. My computer screen flashes white. The call log opens by itself, and it fills. Line after line after line. No numbers, no timestamps. Just my name, over and over, like a chant. The thing kneels down, slow, bringing its face level with mine beneath the desk. Its breathing starts to match mine. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, and then it lifts its hand. It's holding scissors, my scissors. I don't remember dropping them. I don't remember its hand taking them. I just know they're there, gleaming in the weak light. My mouth opens, but no sound comes out. The last thing I hear before everything goes black is my own voice, whispered so close it feels like it's coming from inside my skull. Wake up. My head slips from my hand and hits the desk. Fuck! I jolt upright, gasping, heart pounding like I've been running. The monitors glow. The office is exactly the same. The air smells like coffee and stale carpet. The hum of the lights is steady and normal. Everything is where it should be. I rub my eyes, trying to convince myself it was just a nightmare. Then I feel a sting in my palm. I look down. A thin, dried line of blood runs across the skin like a shallow cut. I check the time. 3 a.m. Exactly. I move the mouse quickly to keep the computer from locking because the habit is automatic and my hands need something to do. The call log is already open on the screen. 4 calls, no numbers, no timestamps. Just my name. A knock echoes somewhere down the hall. And this time, I know I'm awake. Story 3. It's 1 p.m. on a Wednesday, and I'm not at work. I'm sitting on my parents' couch in their living room, staring at a blank TV screen that isn't even turned on, because I can't handle noise right now. My clothes are clean now, but I still feel dirty, like there's a film on me that water can't touch. A few hours ago, I was evicted from my own house, except evicted isn't the right word. You don't get evicted by something that isn't a person. The house dug itself down into the earth and left me standing on the street like an idiot. The police were here earlier. They asked the usual questions, the kind you'd ask someone after a fire or a break-in, even though there was no fire and nothing had been broken into. They kept circling back to the same things. How long I'd lived there, who else lived there, whether we'd had any problems with the landlord, whether I'd been drinking or using anything. My mom sat stiffly in her chair while I answered. My dad did that thing where he tries to look calm and reasonable so other people stay calm and reasonable too, but his hands wouldn't stop moving. He kept rubbing his palms together like he was cold. Before the police left, one of them told us another team would probably come by. A different team. More questions. He didn't say what kind of team. But the way he said it made my stomach sink, like he knew they weren't sending normal people. Now it's quiet. Too quiet. My parents are in the kitchen whispering, thinking I can't hear them. I can. Every time my mom says my name, my chest tightens. I keep trying to explain it in my own head over and over, like if I find the right words, it will turn into something normal. A few months ago, I moved into a new house. That's how this started. Just an address, a lease, a key. I had found 2 roommates to share it with. People I didn't know well, more like strangers I'd met through a rental listing and a couple of short conversations. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies. We were 3 adults who could split rent and mostly stay out of each other's way. And we did. We all did our own thing. I went to work, came home, ate, slept. They did whatever they did. I kept to myself because that's easier. Less drama, less dealing with people's moods, less pretending. The house itself seemed fine. Medium-sized, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a decent living room, a kitchen that looked nicer than anything I'd had in college apartments. It sat right in the middle of a normal suburban neighborhood, surrounded by other houses that looked almost the same. Lawns, driveways, mailboxes, kids' bikes leaning against fences, the kind of place where nothing is supposed to happen. It was also surprisingly cheap for a newly furnished house. At the time, that felt like luck. After years of bouncing between dorms and apartments, I thought I'd finally found a place I could stay for a while. I didn't understand that cheap can be another word for warning. The first thing that changed was small enough that I could blame myself: a bar of hand soap. I bought my favorite kind, milk and honey. Yeah, it's corny. I don't care. It's a warm smell. It reminds me of clean towels and quiet mornings. I put it by the bathroom sink, used it for a few days, and then one night I washed my hands, and the smell was wrong. Not just different. Wrong. It had a warm note to it still, but underneath it was something sulfur-like and sour, like rotten eggs trying to hide under perfume. I rinsed longer than I needed to, rubbing my hands together like I could scrub the smell off, and when I was done, I kept sniffing my skin. It didn't smell like soap. It smelled like something alive, like bacteria. I stared at the bar sitting in its little dish and tried to tell myself, soap can go bad. Can it? I picked up the package from the trash and checked for an expiration date. Nothing. I looked anyway, front and back, like I'd find a hidden label. I didn't. So I told myself one of my roommates must have moved it. Maybe they dropped it somewhere gross. Maybe water had gotten trapped under it. Maybe it had absorbed something from the sink. Houses can have weird smells. I threw it away and bought another bar. The next thing was the cranberry juice. I'd picked up a bottle from the grocery store, the kind I always buy. Tart, fruity, nothing special. One morning I poured myself a glass and took a sip, and it tasted like I'd bitten my tongue. Metallic, coppery, the kind of taste you get when there's blood in your mouth. I looked at the glass. The color was off too. Instead of that deep red, it was more opaque. A weird orange red that made me think of rust mixed with juice. I checked the date. It wasn't expired. I'd just bought it. I poured it down the sink and stood there watching it disappear, thinking how stupid it was to be unsettled by a bottle of juice. So I told myself it was a bad batch. It happens. Grocery wasted. Move on. But I didn't move on. Not really. The feeling stayed. Like my brain had noticed something and didn't want to stop noticing. I should have moved out the moment I saw the blue line on the bathtub faucet. It was a bumpy blue ridge, like someone had dragged a thick line of paint across the metal. At first I thought it was hair dye or a paint spill. I didn't know what my roommates did for work, and I didn't ask. People bring home messes. I grabbed a sponge and started scrubbing. The blue line didn't fade. It didn't smear. It didn't lift. Instead, it bent inward. With a soft squish, I froze with the sponge in my hand. I touched it again, firmer this time, and pulled back so fast I almost slipped. It felt fleshy. Warm. And I swear, I felt it pulse under my fingers. My stomach turned in a slow, sick roll. No, I told myself. No, it's mold. Some weird mold. Mold can be slimy. Mold can be bumpy. Mold can be whatever this is. I messaged the landlord. I sent a photo. I tried to sound normal, like this was a maintenance issue and not a nightmare growing in our bathroom. A day passed. No response. I avoided that bathroom. We had two, so I used the downstairs one and told myself I'd deal with it later. People put off weird house problems all the time. That's how you survive. You pick your battles. But the house didn't stop. One morning before work, I was making my usual sandwich. Turkey, cheese, spicy mustard. I used one of my ceramic plates I'd bought myself, cheap store-bought stuff. I knew what they felt like. Smooth, glazed, solid. That morning, the plate felt dry, brittle, like old bone. A dot of mustard fell off my sandwich and landed on the plate. It didn't sit on the surface. It sank. Not quickly, but visibly, like the plate had pores, and the mustard was soaking into it. I stared and then rubbed at it with my thumb. The stain spread, like I was smearing it into skin. I scrubbed the plate in the sink until my hands hurt, but the stain wouldn't budge. I went online and searched if ceramic glaze can wash off after a few cycles. Everything said no. Not like that. Not overnight. Not for every plate. I switched to plastic plates after that, told myself it was convenient. Less dishes, less worrying. A week passed after my landlord message. Still no response. The blue mark on the bathtub had grown. It was longer now, one end stretching down toward the bottom of the tub and the other creeping toward the faucet handles like it was trying to wrap itself around them. I asked my roommates if they'd heard anything. They said no. They looked irritated that I was asking, like I was bothering them with normal tenant behavior. Then they told me their rooms had problems too. One roommate said there was a strange white substance leaking from her radiator, thick and sticky. The other said the paint in his room had started chipping off, and underneath it was a gray texture that looked like skin. And then came the worst one, an eyeball. He told me he found an eyeball growing in the corner of a window. At first he thought it was a prank. A plastic eyeball left on the sill for Halloween or something. But when he went to touch it, it was wet and warm, and when he tried to lift it, he couldn't, because it was attached. A red veiny cord disappeared into the seam of the window, like the building had grown it there and tucked it into the frame. I felt sick listening to them talk, not just scared, nauseous. Like my body understood something my mind refused to accept. They weren't reacting the way I expected. They were disturbed, sure, but also weirdly calm about it, like they were already building explanations in their heads to keep themselves from breaking. I couldn't do that. I decided to handle the bathtub myself. I found my toolbox and grabbed the first sharp thing I had. A bench scraper. Not the right tool, but I didn't care. I walked into the upstairs bathroom and stood over the tub staring at the blue ridge. I jabbed it with the blade. A red spray hit my face, warm and wet. A stream of dark fluid shot out of the blue line and pooled at the base of the tub, spreading fast like spilled paint. Except the smell wasn't paint. It was blood. I wiped my eyes with shaking hands, blinking hard, praying my vision was lying to me. But it wasn't. The color was too deep, the smell too real. I touched the liquid and my fingers came away warm. My bathtub was bleeding. In my shock, I didn't move fast enough and the stream started to sputter and spray, splattering the tiled wall. Panic hit me in a delayed wave. I grabbed duct tape from my toolbox, then froze again. Tape a wound? On a tub? My thoughts got stupid, irrational, desperate. Is it alive? Do I need a first aid kit? Can a bathroom get infected? I dropped the duct tape and ran for the first aid kit. I came back with gauze and a big bandage like I was treating a person. I pressed it over the bleeding ridge and held my hand down hard, counting minutes like I'd learned in some basic training video. 10 minutes. My palm ached. My breath came in short, sharp pulls. The bleeding slowed. It stopped. I stood there, panting, staring at my bandaged bathtub like it might open an eye and look back at me. One of my roommates walked in, saw the mess, and stared. "Dude," he said, confused. "What did you do? Are you hurt?" I didn't even know how to answer. I kept my hand pressed down a second longer, just in case. "The landlord won't answer," I said. "Something's wrong with the tub." I lifted my hand and showed him the blood, the bandage, the sticky red mess. He leaned closer, squinting. "Weird," he said. "You sure it's not rusty water? Maybe you hit a pipe. We should call a plumber." I stared at him like he was speaking another language. "That's blood. There was blood coming out of our bathtub wall." He shook his head, dismissive. "You're tripping. That's not possible. It has to be pipes." "Didn't the landlord say there was red clay under the foundation?" The landlord didn't say anything about clay. The landlord hadn't said anything about anything. But hearing a normal explanation, even a dumb one, felt better than accepting the truth. "Fine," I said. "Say it's clay. Either way, this can mess up the plumbing. Call a plumber." A plumber arrived about half an hour later, like this was the easiest job on his schedule. He looked at the tub, patched the spot, and said it was a broken pipe with a blue lining. He said the water was from a sewage line. He talked fast, confident like he'd done it 1,000 times. Nothing about it made sense to me. I'd lived in apartments for years. Broken pipes didn't bleed warm fluid. Pipes didn't pulse. When I tried to ask more, he checked his phone and said he had another client. Then he left. I stood in the bathroom after he was gone and stared at the patch job. It looked normal. Too normal. Like the house was letting us pretend. For a few days, things calmed down. Not normal, but quieter. The strange smells came and went. The soap still didn't smell right. The air in some rooms felt damp even when it shouldn't. I started to notice little gaps in my memory. Walking into a room and forgetting why, hearing a sound and not being able to place it. I told myself I was stressed. I was working full time. I didn't have the energy to fight my own mind. I work at a clinic. Lab tests, samples, paperwork, the steady routine of other people's bodies. I know what blood smells like. I know what flesh smells like. I know what chemical burns smell like. That matters because it meant I couldn't talk myself out of what happened next. I got buried at work and barely noticed when my bedroom walls started to get wet. It wasn't like a leak from the ceiling. It was the walls themselves sweating, damp to the touch, leaving dark stains on anything that leaned against them. One night, I woke up to a poster falling onto my face. I grabbed it, confused, and felt it dissolve in my hands. The edges were limp and breaking down, the paper tearing where it had lost strength. It smelled sharp and sour, and when I sat up, the wall behind the poster looked shinier than it should have. That day at the clinic, I stole supplies. I don't know what else to call it. Borrowed, maybe, but I never intended to ask permission. I took Petri dishes and swabs and brought samples back the next day. I swabbed the wetness on my wall. I tested it. And the results hit me like a punch. Stomach acid. Not exactly human, maybe, but close enough that the difference didn't comfort me. Hydrochloric acid, potassium chloride, digestive enzymes. My walls were secreting something designed to break things down, designed to digest. I ran the test again, same results, again, same, again. By the fourth test, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely label the samples. That night, I sat on my bed with my laptop, searching and searching, trying to find anything even remotely similar. Acid coming from walls, houses sweating enzymes, mold that mimics stomach fluids. Anything. Nothing. The following weeks were filled with me calling and emailing the landlord, leaving messages that got more desperate each time. My roommates got more dismissive. They started saying things like, "Someone's pranking us, and it's just the summer heat, and you're seeing things." Seeing things. Like my eyes were the problem. Like the eyeball in the window hadn't happened. It wasn't just denial. It was something darker, like the house was smoothing their brains over, making sharp thoughts duller. One day I came home and found one of my roommates face down on the living room carpet. Her arms were at her sides, her nose pressed into the fibers. For a second, I thought she was dead. I ran over and checked her pulse, fingers on her neck like I'd learned in first aid. She turned her head slowly toward me. She was smiling. It wasn't a normal smile. It was calm, dreamy, content, like she was half asleep and having a good thought. Her mouth was smeared with a yellowish fluid that looked thick and milky. "This is the best house I've ever lived in," she said softly. "So much better than those rickety old places. This one has good bones." I stared at her, fear crawling up my back. "What is on your mouth?" She ignored the question. Her smile widened. "Good bones," she repeated. "Good bones. My home. I'll never leave." That was when I looked down at the carpet. Something was rising from it. A shape under the fibers, stretching them upward like something pushing from below. A mound, rounded, and then details that made my vision blur with shock. A breast, covered in carpet fibers like fur, and where the nipple should have been, there were lips, soft lips, slightly parted, oozing that same yellow fluid from the corners. My roommate's mouth was coated with it because she'd been drinking it. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I ran. I left that night and drove to my parents' house with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I barely remember the drive. I just remember the relief when I saw their porch light. They tried to calm me. My mom hugged me so hard it hurt. My dad asked questions. They told me to call the police right away. But something in my gut told me that would be useless. Not because the police wouldn't want to help, but because they wouldn't be able to. Because how do you tell someone your house has nipples in the carpet and acid in the walls? How do you explain an eyeball growing in a window frame? Worse, I'd forgotten to pack my night medication in the panic. That night, I went through withdrawal. My sleep turned into a feverish mess of vivid nightmares. I dreamed my roommates were melting like candles in an oven, their skin sliding off in sheets, their bodies collapsing into sludge. And the whole time they wore those same content smiles, like they were grateful. In the dream, I realized I was smiling too. I woke up sweating and nauseated, convinced for a second that the bed beneath me was softening. In the morning, reality forced me to go back. I had work, I had bills, I had things in that house. And I still clung to the desperate hope that daylight would make it less real. My roommate acted normal when I returned, like nothing had happened. When I tried to bring it up, she denied everything. "You were probably seeing stuff," she said, rolling her eyes. "That medication can do that to you. Antipsychotics mess people up. Maybe you should stop taking that poison." I froze. I never told my roommates about my medication. I didn't discuss it. I didn't leave the bottles out. I kept my health private. Yet she said it like she'd always known. That made my skin go cold. That night, I tried to act normal. My room was still damp, but I shoved towels along the baseboards and wiped the walls like I was cleaning a spill. I took my meds, put on a night sounds playlist, and laid down, trying to trick my body into sleep. At 3 a.m., I woke up to the feeling of my bed melting. Not sagging, melting. The sheets coated my skin like warm icing. My hips sank into something thick and yielding, and when I tried to push myself up, my hands slipped like the mattress had turned into meat. Panic snapped me fully awake. I flailed and dragged myself out of the bed. My feet hit the floor, and the floor gave way slightly, squishy under my weight, tender and muscular like something living under a thin layer of wood. Half stumbling, half running, I rushed into the bathroom, trying to wash the slime off my arms, my chest, my neck. The bathroom was no longer a bathroom. It looked like something out of a body horror movie, except there was nothing cinematic about it when you were standing inside it. The walls were pink and glistening. The surfaces pulsed in and out like lungs. The air was thick with a greenish vapor that stung my nose and eyes. The smell was unbearable, hot, sour, organic, like a hospital drain mixed with rot. And I could feel everything. That was what convinced me it wasn't a dream. In dreams, pain is fuzzy. Sensations slip. This was sharp and real. The floor flexed. The walls breathed. The sink vibrated as if it had a heartbeat. I stepped back into the hallway and forced myself to look at the whole house. Everything was changing. Everything was alive. Veins and arteries branched across the ceilings, down the walls into the floor, like roots growing in reverse. Bile-like fluid ran through creases like tiny rivers and pooled in corners. The kitchen sink overflowed with it, the basin bubbling as if the drain was a throat swallowing and failing. An umbilical cord ran from the couch to the TV, thick and wet, pulsing faintly. An eyeball stared at me from inside the ceiling lamp. I stood there shaking, my mind trying to form sentences it couldn't finish. Then I felt the burn. My feet. A sharp, stinging sensation that spread upward fast. I looked down and realized the floor wasn't just alive. It was acidic. I was standing inside something's stomach, and it was starting to digest me. That thought cut through everything. It made the world simple, in a way terror sometimes does. Get out. I ran to my room and grabbed whatever hadn't turned into sludge. My computer, a few clothes, my medication. Anything important I could reach without sinking into the softening floor. Everything I touched was damp with the house's fluids. Even the fabric of my clothes felt wrong, heavier, soaked with something that wasn't water. I banged on my roommates' doors, screaming their names, begging them to wake up, to answer, to open up. No response. I tried the handles. Locked. I don't know if they were asleep, unconscious, dead, or something worse. I don't know if they were already part of the house. I don't know if the house had convinced them not to leave. I only know I didn't have time. The front door was sealed, not jammed. Sealed. It looked welded shut with something dark and clotted, like dried blood packed into every gap. I pulled and shoved and cursed until my arms shook. The door didn't move. I grabbed the nearest sharp thing I could find. A bone shard stuck out of the wall like a broken piece of furniture, except it wasn't furniture. It was bone, pale and jagged. I used it like a knife and cut into the clotted seal around the door. Warm fluid smeared over my hands. I barely noticed. I was past disgust, past fear, operating on pure survival. After what felt like forever, the seal tore enough for me to wrench the door open. Cold outside air hit my face like a slap. I stumbled out onto the porch and fell onto the steps, gasping, dragging my bag with me. For a second, I didn't move. I just breathed, sucking in normal air like it was medicine. Then I turned to look back at the house, and the house moved. It shifted and rotated in a violent twisting motion, the way an alligator spins in water when it catches prey. The entire structure warped, like it was made of muscle instead of wood. Somewhere in the mess of siding and windows, a single huge yellow eye opened and fixed on me. It looked at me with the calm focus of something hungry. Then it began to burrow. The house folded inward and drove itself down into the foundation, into the ground as if the earth was soft and welcoming. Soil collapsed. Concrete cracked. The yard sank. In seconds, the whole thing disappeared, leaving behind a massive sinkhole that swallowed the last pieces of porch and lawn like they were crumbs. The neighborhood was silent. No screams. No doors opening. No people rushing out. Not even barking dogs. I sat on the sidewalk for hours, hugging my knees to my chest, staring at the hole where my home had been. The sky slowly changed color. Birds started to sing like nothing happened. The sun rose over distant trees and shone warmly onto that impossible crater. I kept closing my eyes and opening them again, waiting for the world to correct itself. Around 6 a.m., I realized I must have dozed off. The sun baked whatever had splashed onto me. Blood and viscera dried into a brown crust on my skin. My hair was stiff. My hands smelled like pennies and sour milk. My phone still worked. Barely. I called the police first, then my parents. The police arrived. Then more police. Then black vans with no markings rolled in and parked around the scene like they owned it. People in plain clothes stepped out, not wearing uniforms, not talking loudly, moving with the same calm efficiency I'd seen in my clinic when something serious came in. My parents arrived too. My mom clutched me so hard I felt her nails through my shirt. My dad kept looking from me to the sinkhole and back again like he was trying to force logic onto it with his eyes. There was no trace of my roommates. No bodies. No belongings. Nothing. Just a hole. Investigators told me they'd contact me if they found anything important. They said it like a promise, but their eyes didn't match. Their eyes said I wasn't going to hear much. Their eyes said I'd already seen too much. Now I'm here at my parents' house, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what comes next. I keep thinking about the locked doors, about my roommates not answering, about the way one of them smiled into the carpet like it was feeding her. And I keep thinking about how normal the house looked when I first moved in. Fresh paint, clean kitchen, a good deal, like bait. If anyone has an open room for rent in the Diriunku area, please message me. I'm serious. I can pay. I'm quiet. I keep to myself. And I will never, ever sign another lease without checking what the walls smell like. Story 4. I know this sounds insane, but nothing has ever gotten under my skin the way this has. I'm the sensitive one in my family. That's what they've called me since I was little. I'm the person who notices things first. The person who gets chills for no reason. The person who sees movement in the corner of a room and turns, only to find nothing there. It usually happens in my peripheral vision. A dark figure at the edge of a doorway, a shape in the hall, a shadow that doesn't match the lighting. When I look directly, it's gone. If you've never experienced it, it's easy to assume it's imagination, or tired eyes, or your brain doing that pattern recognition thing. And maybe sometimes it is, but not always. Because there's another layer to it that's hard to explain unless you've felt it. Sometimes a presence feels normal, almost natural, like the way a person feels when they're in a room with you, even if you can't see them. It doesn't scare me, it doesn't make me tense, it's just there, quiet, neutral. Other times it feels heavy and wrong, like the air itself gets thicker, like the room has gained weight, like something has stepped in that doesn't belong and wants you to know it doesn't belong. I can usually tell right away which kind it is, and because I can tell, I have rules. I don't say them out loud in my house because I don't want to sound dramatic, but I follow them anyway. If something feels wrong, I don't feed it attention. I don't talk about it too much. I don't stare into dark corners trying to force it to show itself. I don't challenge it. I have this belief, maybe it's superstition, maybe it's instinct, that acknowledging something's like opening a door. And once a door is open, it's hard to close. So when I feel that heavy kind of presence, I try to do the opposite. I try to move through my life like it isn't there, like I didn't notice, like I'm not afraid. Because I've always felt that if I think too hard about it, if I focus on it, if I give it a name, it will turn its face toward me. And lately, I've been afraid I already did. Our house is about 30 years old. It isn't ancient. It doesn't look like a horror movie house. It looks like a normal family home in a compound where other relatives live close by. There's a second house, and the same compound that's less than 20 years old. My grandma lives there with my aunt and uncle, and that's where I spent most of my childhood. Even now, it's the place that feels the most familiar to me. I know where every squeaky floorboard is. I know how the air smells after it rains. I know what the rooms look like with the lights off. Both houses have presences. In our house, there's an old woman's spirit. I don't know who she was when she was alive, but the impression she gives is clear in the way some things are clear without logic. 60s or 70s. Not fragile, but not young. The kind of age where someone has lived long enough to carry authority just by existing. We call her Lady Might. That name is half a joke and half a compromise. People where I'm from talk about a white lady, a common ghost story figure. My mom didn't like calling her that directly. She added the word might, like a softener. Like saying maybe would keep it polite. Like it would keep us from sounding like we're making a claim too bold. Lady Might is neutral. That's the best word I have. She isn't warm, but she isn't cruel. She doesn't chase us. She doesn't scare the life out of us on purpose. The feeling she carries is more like ownership. We own the house legally. We live here. We pay for repairs and bills. We make decisions about what furniture goes where. But spiritually, if I'm being honest, it has always felt like she lives here more than we do. Like the house is hers in a way paper can't touch. The other house, my grandma's house, has a different presence. It's a young boy, a child who never got to grow up. The story in my family is that he died from sickness that got worse because his mother neglected him. I don't know all the details, and I don't want to. It feels disrespectful to pick it apart like gossip, but the grief around it is real, and that grief seems to be part of why he lingers. My uncle, especially, has always been connected to him. When my uncle was a kid, the boy was like a friend to him, the way kids can become friends without needing introductions. And when the boy got sick, my uncle tried to help him in the only way a kid knows how. He brought him food and water when they played together. He tried to look after him. But he couldn't fix sickness. He couldn't make an adult care. When the boy died, it stayed with my uncle. He told me once he didn't really have friends after that until he went to high school. Like something in him went quiet. Like the world taught him too early that caring doesn't always save anyone. I can count my direct interactions with these two presences on one hand. The first was the young boy. It happened in my grandma's house upstairs. The second floor is strange because it has space, 2 bedrooms and a large living room, but it's barely used. It's not fully inhabited the way the downstairs is. People go up there to store things or clean, but it doesn't feel like a living area. It feels like a place waiting to be lived in. That day, I saw him sitting on the floor. He wasn't solid. He wasn't like a person with clear edges. He was translucent, like watery glass, like a figure made out of thin mist caught in the shape of a child. He didn't look at me with a scary expression. He didn't lunge or vanish dramatically. He just sat there, like he belonged there. And what made it stranger was that he rarely shows himself. Usually I only feel him. I feel him hanging out higher up, near the ceiling, near the attic space, like he's drawn to the top of the house. I don't see him often. So seeing him clearly, sitting on the floor, felt like a message I didn't understand. The second experience was Lady Might. She was in our bathroom area, what we call the bathroom room. It's a weird layout. There's a space like a storage room that leads into the actual bathroom, and that storage area doesn't have a door. It's just an opening. At night, it can look like a mouth. I saw her floating in the air there, a white figure, not glowing like a cartoon, but pale in a way that made her shape stand out against the darker background. She didn't move toward me. She didn't reach out. She was just there, suspended, quiet, watching. That's when the name stuck. Lady Might. The old woman in white who might be watching you, but might also just be minding her own business. After those experiences, I developed a belief that probably sounds childish, but it became a kind of comfort. I started to feel like every home needed neutral spirits, the way a home needs locks on doors. Like certain presences, safe or neutral ones, act as a barrier, a repellent. Like they hold the space in a way that keeps worse things out. Maybe it's not true. Maybe it's just how my brain tries to make sense of living with something invisible. But it's the belief I had. It made me feel less helpless. Then my dad moved in with us. My parents broke up a couple years back. They aren't together anymore, but they co-parent. They've managed to become something like friends. It's not perfect, but it works. And with time and circumstance and money and family logistics, my dad ended up moving into our smaller house with us. My dad has always been similar to me in his own way. He's told me stories from his time working as a security guard. Strange things he saw late at night. shadows where there shouldn't be shadows, feelings like someone standing behind him when he was alone. He believes in this stuff, or at least he believes enough to respect it. But he doesn't welcome it. He doesn't want spirits coexisting in his household. He doesn't see them as neutral roommates or protectors. He sees them as problems, intruders, things to push out. Not long after he moved in, he told me and my mom that he spoke to Lady Might. He said he told her she could walk into the light now because he was here. Like his presence replaced hers. Like a man moving into a house automatically outranks whatever has lived there longer than all of us. I remember feeling sick when he said it. Not because I wanted Lady Might to stay out of loyalty, but because it felt arrogant. It felt like poking something you don't understand and assuming it will politely obey. And after that, things started going wrong. Maybe they're unrelated. Maybe it's coincidence, stacked on coincidence until it feels like a pattern. I've tried to tell myself that. I've tried to be rational. But when you live inside something, it's hard not to connect the dots. October 20 to 25, my cousin, a little boy still in elementary school, died. He had Crohn's disease, and then he got dengue, a severe case. It hit him hard, and his body couldn't handle both. It's the kind of loss that doesn't feel fair even by normal standards, the kind that makes adults look stunned and helpless because what do you say when a child dies? We hosted the funeral. A week of mourning, of people coming and going, of food nobody really tasted, of prayers, of watching the adults' faces crumble when they thought nobody was looking. In the middle of that week, my cat died. He was plump, healthy, spoiled. The kind of cat you expect to live forever because he eats well and sleeps in sunbeams and acts like the house belongs to him. He wasn't old. He wasn't sick. There was no warning. He was just gone. A day before my cousin was buried. I remember standing there with grief piled on grief, like someone kept stacking weights on my chest. A child, then a pet, then the feeling that the air around our home was changing into something colder. Then March 2026, my little kitty died too. Again, out of nowhere, no sickness, no slow decline, no explanation that made sense. And then it kept happening. My uncle's cat passed, then a kitten, then our Brown family dog, then my uncle's teenage dog, one after another. It was like something was sweeping through our compound, not in a dramatic movie way, but in a quiet, relentless way, the kind that doesn't give you time to recover before the next loss lands. You can look at it scientifically, and I have. Viruses, poisoning, something in the food, something in the water. But the pattern didn't fit cleanly. They weren't all eating the same food. They weren't all in the same areas. They weren't all showing symptoms. Some of them were checked and nothing obvious was found. They had been healthy. They had been fine. Before all this, we had 5 cats and 5 dogs across the family. Now we're down to a mama cat with 1 kitten and 4 dogs. Even writing the numbers makes my stomach twist because I keep thinking about what even means. Like the universe wants things balanced. Like the count matters to something that isn't us. One of the dogs, my uncle's, was known for howling around 3 in the morning. Not the silly howl some dogs do when they hear a siren. Not the playful noise. This was different. It sounded like weeping, like crying, like the dog was grieving something before it even happened. People joked about it at first, but the sound always raised the hair on my arms. Animals don't make that kind of sound for no reason. And it wasn't only the pets. It started to touch us too. I began getting migraines more often. The kind that makes light feel like knives and noise feel like a hammer. My dad barely sleeps now. My mom complains about body pain almost every day. Back, shoulders, legs, like her muscles are constantly braced for something. We tell ourselves it's stress, grief, the normal cost of losing so much in such a short time. And maybe that's all it is. But the heaviness I talked about earlier, the wrong presence, I felt it more. I felt it in the corners of rooms in the hallway, near doorways where the air seems to shift. I felt it while trying to sleep, when the house is quiet and the darkness feels too attentive. I've felt it when I'm alone and my mind starts reaching for explanations. I used to believe thinking about it attracts it. So I tried to stop thinking about it. I tried to live like nothing was happening. I tried to act like the deaths were just sad luck. I tried to ignore the way my skin prickles sometimes when I pass the bathroom room. I tried to ignore the way the second floor of my grandma's house feels like it's holding on to something. I tried to ignore the possibility that when my dad told Lady Might to leave, something else heard the invitation. But writing this down, remembering every detail in order, forcing my mind to look at it straight, I can feel that heaviness again now. It's like the moment I put the story into words, something in the air responded. Like I just cleared my throat in a silent room and whatever was listening turned its head. I shouldn't have written this. That's the thought that keeps repeating, because now it knows I can feel it. And I haven't checked on the animals in a while. The numbers aren't even yet. That last part shouldn't matter. It's just counting. It's just anxiety trying to find patterns. I know that. I tell myself that. But I also know the way my chest tightens when I think of the mama cat and her kitten, of the dogs sleeping in the yard, of how quiet the compound has become at night. I can't shake the fear that something has been taking pieces, and that by noticing, by remembering, by naming it as heavy and wrong, I've made myself easier to find. I keep telling myself not to look too hard into the corners, not to talk about it too much, not to acknowledge it. But I already did, and the house feels like it's listening. Story 5. Something happened to me last week that I can't stop thinking about. I've tried telling people, but everyone keeps brushing it off like it was nothing, like it was just a dream or stress or a lack of sleep. I understand why they want an easy answer. I'm a new mom. I'm exhausted. My life runs on broken hours and half-finished thoughts. But I know what I heard, and I know what I didn't do. I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. Maybe putting it into words will help my mind settle. Maybe someone will read it and recognize the feeling. Or maybe I just need proof that it happened the way I remember it, even if nobody else believes me. It was a Friday. Normal in that dull, repetitive way days become when you have a newborn. Everything is measured in feedings, diapers, naps, and tiny stretches of quiet that never last long enough. I was making dinner for Jack, my husband, and Junior, our baby. Junior was still so new that newborn didn't feel like a stage, it felt like his entire identity. He slept because that's what babies do, and he cried when he didn't, and the rest of life squeezed itself around those two modes. Jack was asleep too. He works nights, and on Fridays he usually tries to get some rest before his shift. He sleeps heavy, always has. Once he's out, it's like the world could end and he'd still be dead to it. I made dinner, ate with Jack after I woke him, fed Junior, did the little routine we've settled into. Nothing special. Nothing that would stand out in my memory, if not for what happened later. Jack left for work. I kissed him goodbye at the door, the way we always do, because even after years of marriage, I still have this quiet fear that one day one of us will leave without that kiss and something awful will happen. Then I fed the baby again and put him into his crib. After that, I crawled into bed and read my book for what I told myself would be a few minutes. It's always a lie. The moment my eyes start moving across the page, my body remembers it's allowed to stop holding itself upright, and sleep takes me. The first time I woke up was around 2 a.m. I didn't even need to check the clock to know what it was. I woke up to the sound every parent learns to recognize in their bones, the shifting, the soft fussing that means hunger is coming. Junior wasn't screaming yet, but he was headed there. You can tell. It's like hearing a match strike before the flame catches. I got out of bed slowly so I wouldn't fully wake myself, slipped on my bathrobe, and went to the kitchen. The house was dark in that quiet, safe way it gets at night, when everything feels distant and muffled. I grabbed a bottle from the fridge, warmed it the way I always do, and carried it down the hallway to Junior's room. His room was dim, just enough light coming in from the nightlight to make out shapes. I lifted him from the crib and sat in the rocking chair, settling him in against me. He latched onto the bottle immediately, greedy and desperate the way newborns can be, like they've never eaten in their life. I rocked him back and forth while he drank. The chair has always made this soft, crackling sound, like wood shifting and settling, a little chorus of tiny pops that somehow feels soothing instead of annoying. I've sat in that chair so many times now that the sound has become part of the routine, like a heartbeat in the background. I started humming without thinking, matching the rhythm of the rocking. Once he finished eating, I kept rocking a little longer. It takes a while for him to drift back down into sleep, and if I put him back too early, he'll wake, angry and wide-eyed, and we'll start the whole thing over again. Eventually, his body softened, his tiny fists unclenched, and his eyelids fluttered shut. I stood up carefully, laid him back into his crib, and watched for a second to make sure he stayed asleep. Then I walked back to my bedroom. I threw my robe onto the corner of the bed, slid under the sheets, and fell asleep instantly. That's what months of interrupted rest does to you. Sleep becomes less of a choice and more of a collapse. After I closed my eyes, it felt like no time passed at all before I woke again. I blinked at the clock. Just after 5 a.m. My first thought was that Junior must be hungry again. That's what newborn life is. Feed, sleep, feed, sleep. My body knew the routine before my mind fully woke up. I sat on the edge of the bed and reached for my robe, pulling it around me. And as I was shifting my weight to stand up, I heard something. Not the baby. Sound from Junior's room, but not the sounds he makes. Not fussing, not crying, not that little hungry whine that builds into a scream. It was calmer than that, controlled. I went still, half standing, listening. At first I thought maybe the sound was coming from outside, someone walking down the sidewalk, a neighbor's early car. But it wasn't outside. It was inside the house. It was in the hallway. It was in Junior's room. I stood up slowly and stepped toward the bedroom door. I didn't turn on any lights. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to announce myself. Maybe part of me already understood that something was off, and my instinct was to stay quiet. I padded into the hallway and stopped, listening. I could hear the rocking chair, that crackling, popping sound, steady and gentle, like someone was rocking it the same way I do. Back and forth, slow and patient. And underneath it I heard singing, not just humming, a lullaby, soft, smooth, and beautiful. The relief that hit me was so strong it almost made my knees weak. Jack was home. He must have gotten off early. Or maybe he'd been unable to sleep at work and came back. Either way, my first feeling wasn't fear. It was gratitude. Jack usually comes home and drops into bed like his body has been switched off. Nothing wakes him once he's asleep. The idea that he'd come home and taken Junior so I could sleep felt like the kind of kindness you remember for years. I leaned against the wall, listening. The lullaby was so gentle. The voice was low, steady. It carried through the hallway like warm air. The rocking chair creaked and crackled in that familiar rhythm, and Junior didn't cry. He didn't make any noise at all, which meant he was calm, fed, comforted. I didn't want to interrupt. I told myself Jack was doing this for me, giving me a break, and I was tired. So tired that the idea of crawling back into bed felt like being offered water in the middle of a desert. So I let myself accept it. I turned quietly and went back to my room. I climbed into bed, pulled the covers up, and fell asleep. The next time I woke up, sunlight was coming through the curtains. It was around 8 a.m. I could tell just by the brightness in the room and the way my brain felt, that weird half-clear morning feeling. And I could hear noise in the kitchen, dishes clinking, cabinets opening, the soft scrape of a pan. I could also hear Junior, not crying, but cooing, that happy little sound he makes when he's awake and content. Again, relief washed through me. Jack was up making breakfast. A normal morning, a good morning. I got out of bed, still wearing my robe, slid into my slippers, and shuffled toward the kitchen. As expected, Jack was at the stove cooking his usual weekend breakfast, eggs and bacon, the smell already filling the house. Junior was in his little seat nearby, and Jack had a bottle in hand, feeding him formula, with one hand while stirring eggs with the other. It looked so normal, so domestic, so safe. "Good morning," Jack said without looking up. I walked over, kissed him, and sat down beside Junior. I took the bottle from Jack and started feeding Junior myself while Jack focused on the stove. Junior drank easily, relaxed and calm. Not starving, not frantic. I smiled and said, "Thank you for last night." Jack glanced over his shoulder. "For what?" I thought he was joking. Jack can be sarcastic early in the morning. "For feeding him," I said, "and rocking him. I really needed to sleep." Jack's hand paused on the spatula. He turned off the stove, not in a casual way, in a deliberate way, like he suddenly needed both his hands and his full attention. Then he turned around and looked directly at me. "What are you talking about?" A small cold feeling started to spread in my chest. I still tried to keep it light. "I heard you at 5, I said. "In his room. You were rocking him and singing. It was really sweet." Jack frowned, and it wasn't playful. It was confused, then slowly, visibly, it turned into something like irritation. as if I was accusing him of something instead of thanking him. "I wasn't home at 5, he said. I stared at him. "Yes, you were. I heard you." "No," he said, firmer. "I wasn't." I laughed once, because sometimes that's what you do when something doesn't fit. "Jack," he cut me off. "I stayed late, overtime. I got home like 30 minutes ago." My mouth went dry. He added, almost like he was building a case in his own mind, "And I don't sing lullabies. I don't even know any." I felt my face heat with a mix of embarrassment and panic. "You were singing," I said. "I heard it clearly?" Jack shook his head in disbelief. "You must have been dreaming. You've been exhausted." He tried to soften his tone after that, probably because he saw my expression change. He looked at Junior, then back at me. "You're not sleeping right," he said. "You probably woke up and fell back asleep, and your brain filled in the rest. That happens." But it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like a dream. I know what dreams feel like. Even vivid ones have a strange softness around the edges, a distance. This felt sharp and real. I remember sitting up. I remember sliding my robe on. I remember standing in the hallway and leaning against the wall. I remember the exact rhythm of the chair. I remember how calm it made me feel. And Junior wasn't hungry when I woke up at 8. That mattered. He should have been starving if he'd missed a feeding. He should have been screaming. He should have woken me up. I tried to explain all of that to Jack, but the more I talked, the more tense he got. Like my insistence was annoying him. Like he wanted it to be nothing so badly that he was getting angry at me for not letting it be nothing. "I don't want to argue," he said finally, voice tight. "You're tired. That's all." I swallowed what I wanted to say, because the last thing I wanted was a fight. Not over something I couldn't prove. Not when we were both running on fumes and our entire life revolved around keeping a tiny human alive. So I stopped talking. But I didn't stop thinking. Later, I told my parents. I told a friend. I tried to make it sound casual, like a weird little story. Every time, I got the same reaction. Sympathetic smiles, gentle nods, and the same explanation. "You must have dreamed it. You're stressed. You're sleep-deprived. New moms hear things." I wanted to scream at them that I know the difference between imagination and sound traveling down a hallway. Because here's what I can't get past. Someone fed my baby at 5 in the morning. I heard the rocking chair. I heard the lullaby. I heard a man's voice. Soft, calm, careful. Junior was quiet, comforted. Not hungry later, not upset. Not the way he would have been if he'd been left alone. It wasn't me. I was in bed. It wasn't Jack. He wasn't home. So who was in my house in the dark, holding my newborn son like they belonged there? And why did they sing to him like they'd done it before? Story 6. When I was a kid, I loved going to the local park to play on the playground. I was shy right up until middle school, the kind of kid who could sit near a group and never quite figure out how to join in. In class, I had trouble making normal conversation, and I always felt like I was a half step behind everyone else, like there was a script they all had and I didn't. But for some reason, the park was different. At the park, you didn't have to be good at talking. You didn't have to be funny or cool or know the right slang. You just showed up and played. Shared hobbies didn't matter when you were pretending the fort was a pirate ship or a space station under attack. Nobody paused the game of Martian invasion to ask your favorite color. It was simple. You ran, you climbed, you yelled, you made alliances and enemies for 10 minutes at a time, and you went home sweaty and happy. The playground at Jump Park was the best part of my childhood. It was one of those giant wooden playgrounds that seemed to exist everywhere in the 90s, built like someone had asked a group of adults to design the coolest possible thing and then refused to let them consider safety codes. The whole area was a big field of mulch with a huge wooden structure rising from the center like a fortress. It had multiple levels, tall posts and steeples that reached up like they were trying to scratch the sky. The tallest tower had a little ladder that only the brave kids climbed. If you got up there, you earned the right to ride the giant twisting slide down into the sand pit below. It felt like flying, at least to a 9-year-old. From the main fort, rope bridges and jungle gym sections branched out in all directions to smaller structures that were still impressive on their own. Some had slides, some had seesaws built into them. Others had rope ladders and netting you could climb until your hands hurt. And between everything were swings, giant tires half buried in the ground, and pipe tunnels you could crawl through and disappear inside for a minute. Looking back, it was basically a lawsuit waiting to happen. Splinters were guaranteed. Slide burns were common. Sometimes a hornet would decide one of the wooden corners was a good place to build a nest, and some kid would learn a painful lesson about sticking their hands into dark places. But we didn't care. That was adult stuff. Parents worried about injuries. Kids worried about whether they were the pirate captain or just another crew member. And honestly, the risk felt worth it. The playground was big enough that you could fall into a game so hard you forgot everything else existed. One Saturday, near the start of summer, my parents took me there. The day was bright and warm, the kind of day that should have packed the place, but the park was strangely empty. There were only a handful of kids spread across the whole playground, which made everything feel bigger. My friend Chris was there, another regular. He wasn't my best friend in school. We went to different classes. But at the park, we always found each other. Chris's parents had given him one of those cheap, disposable cameras, the kind you used once and then dropped off at a pharmacy to get printed. We thought having a camera made our games feel official, like we were explorers documenting a real adventure. We were playing Temple Explorer, which was basically our version of Indiana Jones. We climbed around the main fort and pretended it was a set of ruins we'd discovered, pointing at wooden beams like they were ancient traps and taking photos of artifacts we'd unearthed. We were on the 3rd level of the main structure when we heard a yell from below. "Who dares disturb my temple?" A boy I didn't know very well popped his head up from the ladder to the 2nd level. He was smaller than Chris, but fast-looking, with that wild energy some kids have where you can tell they're about to sprint even when they're standing still. He had the loud voice of a kid who wasn't shy about anything. Chris's eyes lit up like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Run!" he shrieked, and we took off toward the ladder that led to the giant slide. The new kid charged after us, laughing, making monster noises. Our escape got awkward when we reached the slide because the twisting slide was a one-person-at-a-time thing. Chris went first, dropping out of sight, and I had to wait my turn while The temple monster got closer and closer. I remember feeling that childish mix of excitement and fear, the kind that makes your hands sweat and your heart race even though nothing is actually dangerous. This is how most of our games worked. We had good imaginations, but at the end of the day, it was always just tag with a theme. There were always two sides, runners and chasers. I went down the slide, hit the sand pit, and stumbled forward as I stood up. Chris was already sprinting. "We have to make it to the plane," he yelled. We had decided earlier that the seesaw in the far corner of the park was our escape plane. The safe zone had to be at the edge of the playground or else the game wasn't fun. You needed a destination. You needed to feel like you might not make it. Behind us, the monster kid came down the slide fast, boots thumping, and we tore off across the mulch. "Let's split up," I yelled, because splitting up seemed smart in every adventure movie I'd ever seen. I turned toward a rope ladder that led back onto one of the wooden structures so I could take the high route. Chris stayed on the ground, beelining for the seesaw, but then a second kid jumped in front of him with a roar, blocking the path. Another monster. It happens in playground games all the time. Some kid decides it looks fun and joins the winning side. Chris skidded and changed direction, heading toward the area with the big tires. Those tires were a whole section by themselves. Giant rubber rings set upright and on their sides like a weird maze. In summer, a lot of kids avoided them because everyone knew bees liked to nest in them. You'd hear stories about kids getting swarmed, and whether those stories were true or not, they were enough to keep people cautious. Chris was smart. He went for the place the other kids didn't want to chase him into. The second monster kid slowed down when he saw where Chris was headed. He made a face like he suddenly remembered the bee rumors and decided it wasn't worth it. He stopped chasing entirely. I was on the rope bridge connecting to the structure closest to the seesaw when Chris ran under me. I paused for a second to watch him slip into the tire area, ducking between rubber walls. That pause cost me. Hands grabbed my shoulders from behind, and a voice shouted, thrilled and triumphant. "Gotcha!" The first monster kid had caught up to me. My stomach dropped, not because I was scared, but because I knew what the rule was. If you got caught, you became a monster too. I had seen where Chris ran. Now I had to go get him. I turned, smiling despite myself, and told the other monster kid to go guard the escape route. He ran off proudly, like I'd just promoted him. I headed toward the tires. "I'm coming to get you," I yelled as I approached, because even as a kid, I knew the rules mattered. If Chris hadn't seen me get caught, sneaking up would be cheating, and cheating made the game pointless. I scanned the tire maze and spotted Chris's head peek out from behind one of the upright tires. The moment he saw me, he bolted deeper into the maze. I hurried after him, weaving between rubber walls, feeling the mulch crunch beneath my sneakers. I rounded a corner and saw him dive into one of the big tires, lying flat on the ground like a tunnel. He dropped into the center of it as if he planned to hide inside. Too slow, I thought, pleased with myself. I crept closer, taking my time, enjoying the feeling of victory. I wanted him to know I'd won. When I reached the tire he jumped into, I took a deep breath and leaned over it. "You're one of us now," I screamed, reaching down to grab him. My fingers met nothing. Chris was gone. I blinked, confused, and leaned farther in. The tire was empty, just mulch and darkness. That didn't make sense. I'd seen him go in. There was no way he'd slipped out without me noticing. The tire was wide, but it wasn't magic. It wasn't a hole to another world. It was just a tire. I looked around the maze again, expecting to see him laughing from behind another tire. But there was no movement, no giggling, no footsteps. Finally, I stepped over the thick rubber wall and climbed into the middle of the tire myself. A part of me hesitated. I wasn't as scared of bees as some kids, but I still didn't like sticking my hands where spiders might be. The inside smelled like warm rubber and dirt. I got down on my hands and knees and turned in a slow circle, searching, feeling foolish. That was when the ground shifted under me, not like mulch sliding, like something giving way. A seam opened, and before I could even scream, I dropped straight down into darkness. I hit the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of me. My elbows and knees scraped against dirt and wood. For a second, I just lay there, stunned, listening to my own heartbeat. Then I pushed myself up shakily. Above me, light shone through a jagged opening. It wasn't huge, but it was enough to see by. I realized I'd fallen through some kind of flimsy wooden trap door hidden under the tire. The board swayed slightly, shifting the light and casting moving shadows down the tunnel ahead. I was standing in a dirt passage, and down that passage, far ahead, I could see the flicker of a candle. I should have screamed. I should have tried to climb back up immediately. I should have run toward the opening and started pounding on the wood until an adult came. But I was 9, and curiosity is stronger than survival instincts at that age. Also, I was still thinking like the game was real, like this was part of Temple Explorer, like I'd uncovered a secret. So I started walking toward the candle. As I moved deeper, the tunnel widened. It wasn't a tight crawl space. I could stand easily. And as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was bigger than it should have been. The dirt walls were packed tight, and here and there I saw wooden supports hammered into place. As I walked, more openings appeared, branching off the main tunnel. Each branching path had its own tiny point of candlelight, glowing faintly, like someone had placed them just far enough apart for a person to navigate. My excitement started to fade. The more I saw, the less this felt like an accident or a forgotten drain tunnel. This felt built, and not built a long time ago. The air didn't smell stale. The candles looked fresh. The wax drips on the dirt looked recent. I kept walking anyway, drawn forward by the light. Then, as I got closer to the candle at the end of the main passage, the space began to feel different. The air felt heavier. The silence felt intentional, like the tunnels were holding their breath. A wave of fear rolled over me, so fast it made my skin prickle. I stopped walking. That was when I heard it. Behind me, deeper in the tunnel system, came the soft, unmistakable plop of a footstep on dirt. My stomach clenched. I turned around and saw a darkness where there should have been light. The opening above, the trap door I'd fallen through, was gone. Not gone physically, but blocked. A black veil of shadow covered the passage behind me, as if someone had closed the trap door and sealed out the daylight. "Chris," I called, and my voice shook. No answer. Instead, I heard more footsteps. Fast now, plopping on dirt, rushing closer out of the blackness. I turned and ran. I ran toward the candle, because it was the only direction with light. My sneakers slipped on packed dirt. My breath came in sharp little bursts. The tunnel didn't end at the candle like I'd assumed it would. It kept going, and that saved me, because it meant I had somewhere to flee. I sprinted past the candle and kept running. I didn't think. I just followed the tunnel, turning into side passages when I had to, not caring where they went, as long as I kept moving. Behind me, the footsteps continued. Steady, fast, too close. As I ran, candles began to flicker out behind me one by one, as if the darkness itself was chasing. Eventually, I was running blind. Complete darkness, only the sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my feet. Then I turned a corner and slammed straight into someone. The impact knocked me back, and the other kids screamed. A flash exploded in the darkness, bright and white, followed by the clatter of plastic hitting dirt. Chris's disposable camera. The flash left spots and after images burning in my eyes, but in that instant of light, I saw Chris's face. Pure terror. His pupils were huge, his mouth open like he was about to cry, and the look in his eyes wasn't the look of a kid playing tag anymore. It was the look of someone who knows something is real and bad. I grabbed his arm. "Run!" I screamed, and we bolted together into the darkness. Our fun game had turned into something else entirely, and we both knew it. We ran and ran, hearts hammering, lungs burning, turning down passage after passage, not knowing where we were going, only that we had to get away from whatever was behind us. I don't know how long we ran. It felt like miles. Time gets weird when you're scared. Then I saw something, faint light ahead, a thin glimmer in one of the side passages. I tugged Chris hard and pulled him down it. He yelped, but he followed. We sprinted toward that light like it was the only thing in the world. As we got closer, we realized it was coming through holes in the ceiling. A trapdoor, but a different one. This one was pockmarked with tiny openings that let thin rays of daylight through, like a sieve. We scrambled up the dirt wall using little handholds carved into the side, grabbed the edge of the door, and shoved. It popped open. Light slammed into my eyes, bright and harsh, and we spilled out onto the surface like we were being born into the world again. We rolled onto the mulch, panting, gasping, and I slammed the trap door shut behind us with both hands. For a second, we just lay there, breathing, staring at the sky. Then we ran for our parents. We told them everything, talking over each other, crying, shaking, trying to explain tunnels and candles and footsteps. We expected adults to react the way adults react when something is dangerous. They laughed, not in a cruel way. In that patronizing way grown-ups laugh when kids tell a story they think is imagination. They told us we were creative. They said we must have gotten turned around in the tire maze and scared ourselves. Chris got scolded for losing his camera. I begged my mom to believe me. I cried until my face hurt. I convinced her to come with me to the tire area so I could show her the trap door. But when I tried to find it, it was like it didn't exist. The tire was there. The mulch was there. But when I pressed down where the board had been, I hit solid ground. I pushed and pulled and scratched like a dog digging at dirt. Nothing open. My mom sighed, rubbed my back, and told me we should go home. I went quiet for weeks after that. Not silent, but smaller. I didn't want to go to the park. I didn't want to play outside. I didn't want to be anywhere I couldn't see every corner. My mom tried to coax me back. She thought she was helping. She kept telling me it would be fun, that I was being silly, that I needed fresh air. Eventually, it got to the point where she was begging me to go instead of the other way around. After enough time passed, I gave in. I was lonely. I missed Chris. I missed the way the park used to feel like a place where I could be brave and loud and not think too hard. When we arrived, I stepped into Jump Park like I was stepping onto thin ice. But Chris was there. I think our parents had talked and decided we both needed to get back on the horse, so to speak. Seeing a familiar face made the knot in my chest loosen. Chris looked nervous too, but he smiled when he saw me, and we started playing again like old times. My mom had bought me a Tonka dump truck, one of those chunky yellow toys that felt indestructible. Chris and I spent a long time in the sand pit, hauling and dumping dirt, making roads and mountains. For a while, I forgot the tunnels. I forgot the dark. Later, we climbed back up the main tower and went down the big slide, laughing. The way kids laugh when they've decided to pretend everything is fine. By the time my mom told me it was time to leave, I actually felt sad. Not because I wanted to stay forever, but because it felt like maybe the bad thing had been a one-time mistake. Maybe my brain had exaggerated it. Maybe the world was normal again. We walked back toward the car. That was when I noticed something stuck in the hinge of my Tonka truck's bed. A small square of glossy paper. I stopped walking. My mom took a few steps ahead and turned when she realized I wasn't following. "What have you got there, sweetie?" she asked, distracted, casual. I pulled the paper free with stiff fingers. It was a photograph. A developed print from Chris's disposable camera. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling again. I don't remember every detail of the picture now, but I remember enough. The flash had captured a moment underground, our collision, our panic. Except the photo showed more than I had seen. It showed me in the foreground, half-turned, my face caught mid-motion. And behind me, in the darkness, was a man. He was tall and thin, his body hunched like he didn't fit the space. His limbs looked too long, his skin looked stretched tight. One arm was reaching toward the back of my head, fingers spread, like he was about to grab me, and he was close. So close that if the camera hadn't flashed, I'm not sure I would have ever known he was right there. My mom saw my face change and stepped closer. When she looked at the photo, the color drained out of her face so fast, it scared me more than the picture did. She snatched it out of my hand. "Don't look," she said, voice shaking, and she shoved it into her purse like she could erase it by hiding it. We didn't go home right away. We went straight to the police station. Jump Park closed the following week. After my mom called, everything moved quickly in that way authorities do when they finally decide something is real. Officers came to our house. They asked questions. I sat in a chair with my feet not touching the floor and tried to explain tunnels and candles and footsteps again, but this time nobody laughed. The local police combed the park. They dug. They brought equipment. They broke through the trap door hidden under the tires because whatever had been holding it shut before, they didn't care. They found the tunnels exactly as I'd described, running under the playground like roots. They found that it wasn't just one entrance. There were many. Trap doors scattered around the park, hidden under mulch, under equipment. tucked into places kids crawled and climbed every day without noticing. They found little side chambers in the tunnels, supplies, old jars of pickled food, burnt-down candles, rope, the kind of things someone stores when they plan to stay underground for a while. And deep in the tunnel system, they found a small room. It was mostly bare, just dirt walls and that heavy underground smell. The only thing in it was a stained, rotting mattress. But they didn't find the man. They never found the gangly figure from the photo. They never found the person who had been close enough to touch me and somehow still stayed just out of reach. Sometimes I think about how the park looked on the surface. Sunlight, kids yelling, parents chatting on benches, and how underneath it there was a whole other world built for something else. And the part I still can't shake, even now, is this. In that photo, his arm was reaching for the back of my head. He was close enough that he should have grabbed me. He didn't. Or maybe he tried. And I only got away because the camera flashed at the exact right moment. Like a burst of artificial daylight in a place that hated light. Either way, I grew up after that. Not in a normal way. In the way you do when you learn too young. That sometimes the monsters aren't pretend, and sometimes they're already standing behind you, just out of sight.